The six kingdoms of life. All living things are grouped into general categories called kingdoms. Up until about 5 years ago, these were the first classification or separation of living things. Now we have grouped them into what are called domains. And we have three domains. Four of the six kingdoms all belong into the domain called Eukaryota. And this domain has the kingdoms that have really advanced complex cells. Each cell in this kingdom has membrane-bound organelles. They're very large and dynamic. And the other two domains, archaea and bacteria, are bacterial kingdoms. Each kingdom have what are called prokaryotic cells, which are very simple and do not have membrane-bound organelles. The first kingdom, the animal kingdom, is the one that most people are familiar with. We are, as humans, part of the animal kingdom, and all things within this kingdom are what we would consider the most advanced organisms. Characteristics for the animal kingdom or kingdom Animalia start out with the cell type. Again, kingdom Animalia is part of the eukaryote or eukaryota domain because their cells are eukaryotic. Again, this means that they're very complex. They have membranes surrounded or bound organelles, and they're very large. They're also what we call heterotrophic, which means that they get their food or nourishment from different places. Basically, they have to eat things. All organisms within this kingdom are also what we call multicellular, meaning they're all made of at least more than one cell. They're mobile, so these things can move. And examples, obviously, things like dogs, cats, monkeys, whatever have you. There are all kinds of things that, again, we're very familiar with. Maybe slightly less advanced than the animal kingdom is the plant kingdom. Here in California, we're quite lucky that we have such a huge diversity of plants, and many unique plants as well, including the giant sequoia, which is the most massive living thing on the planet, totally endemic or unique to California. The coastal redwood, the tallest living thing, will grow just below 400 feet tall. And the oldest living thing, which actually is in both California and Nevada, which is called the bristlecone pine. And these pine trees can grow for nearly 4,000 years, which, if they're that old now, it puts them growing prior to the construction of the pyramids, which I think is pretty cool. On the bottom of the image, the pitcher plant, that's an insectivorous plant that will trap insects, digest the insects to get nitrogen so that it can make its proteins. These plants do photosynthesize like all plants, which is part of their major characteristic. The major characteristics of kingdom Plantae, or the plant kingdom, again, they're eukaryotic cells, so this is the second of the four kingdoms that are part of the Eukaryota domain. They're autotrophic, not heterotrophic like animals. Everything within this kingdom produces their own food, so they're given the name autotrophic. Again, everything in this kingdom, like animals, is multicellular. And then one of the differences is that these don't move, so we call them sessile instead of mobile. Examples could be anything, again, from the bristlecone pine to the redwood to moss. Even less advanced than the plants would be the kingdom fungi, or the mushrooms, kingdom fungi. Most of what we see above ground, the mushroom caps, is actually just a fraction of what these organisms are actually made of. If you look on the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you can see the mycelium or hyphae. It's the thread-like fibers that basically will spread from a mold spore. They will digest all the nutrients under the ground or below the tree bark. And they'll spread typically in a ring-shaped pattern. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner with the boy on his lawn, those mushroom caps have shot up from the ground in order to release their spores and reproduce, and they've created what's called a fairy ring. Other common examples of this is ringworm. It's the fungus that grows in the skin of humans and creates a ring-shaped pattern. And with the major characteristics of kingdom fungi, again, eukaryotic cells. This is three of the four kingdoms. They're heterotrophic like animals. but most of what they do is with digestive enzymes that they secrete from their tissues. They're multicellular, just like the plants and the animals. And then also within kingdom fungi, we're seeing something for the first time, that these are actually single-celled as well. And the example of that, which I have on the bottom, is yeast. And yeast is used in bread, alcohol fermentation, and that sort of thing. And they're very small, single-celled organisms. Again, like plants, these are sessile. They don't really move. They grow, but they don't move. And one of the major characteristics of all fungi is that they're decomposers. We'll find out in ecology how truly important that is. In my mind, one of the most unique kingdoms is kingdom Protista, or the protists. The organisms range from the small single-celled organisms at the top of the page to large seaweed or kelp. And the types of organisms that we typically consider to be protists are algae. All of what we see is actually an algae. And the algae that's strewn through the fingertips of that man's hand in the middle of the page, if we were to look at that under the microscope, it actually looked like what's in the middle bottom, the coiled spring. And then next to that we have those little spheres, and each of those green dots are individual algae cells that live together as what we call a colony. So each of those lives as an individual, kind of connected to the sphere. It's very interesting and unique. On the bottom right hand corner, we see the algae can be visible not only from, say, a helicopter with what is considered to be red tide, but also from a satellite view you can see in the middle of the page. And these types of organisms can live in snow, so you can see the watermelon snow on the right, and then also say in Yellowstone in some of the geysers or the hot pools, the hot springs. So very unique indeed. In looking at the characteristics of Kingdom Protista, you can see that they are very dynamic and very unique. Again, this is the last of the four kingdoms that has eukaryotic cells. These are both autotrophic and heterotrophic organisms. When we talk about plankton, we have individual single-celled organisms that float on the ocean's waters, on pond water, and they just sit there and photosynthesize. And then we have animal-like cells, protozoans, that will swim around and eating the phytoplankton. So those are the heterotrophic forms. Multicellular forms of algae are the kelp or the seaweed. Single-celled would be the plankton, and then the colonial, I gave you two examples. One was the volvox, that sphere on the bottom of the page, and then the little coiled spring, which was also in the man's hand in the middle of the page. Those are colonial forms. Most algae is sessile, it doesn't move, but those protozoans that swim are mobile. And then one very important factor that most people don't understand is that the protists actually are the major producer on the planet, even more so than plants, meaning they pull in tons of carbon dioxide and release oxygen through photosynthesis. The first of the two bacterial kingdoms is kingdom Eubacteria. These two kingdoms are very similar, and again, up until about 5 years ago, were classified in the same domain. And even prior to that, in the 90s, they were actually part of the same kingdom. So things have changed quite a bit. We have these separated because the Eubacteria is considered to be common. It's found pretty much everywhere on the planet, except for where Archaebacteria is, and those are found in extreme environments, and we'll get to that in a minute. All bacteria is classified by either what shape it is, or how it lives, or where it lives, and what it consumes. The characteristics for kingdom Eubacteria, again, in both bacterial kingdoms, they are prokaryotic cells or prokaryotic organisms, which again means that they're very small and simple. They do not have membrane-bound organelles, or any organelles for that matter. As far as how they get energy, these bacteria are heterotrophic. They can consume other things. They're autotrophic. For example, we have cyanobacteria, which if you were to look back at the other slide, it's in the upper right-hand corner. Or chemotrophic, meaning they digest inorganic chemicals or absorb inorganic chemicals to extract energy from them. All bacteria are single-celled organisms, and that's actually a characteristic of prokaryotic cells. They can move or they can't move, and kingdom bacteria are typically considered common bacteria. Examples would be E. coli, which is an intestinal bacteria, We have bacteria in many food products, including yogurt. And the last of the 6 kingdoms, Archaebacteria. Archae means ancient, ancient bacteria. Many scientists believe that these organisms are actually what or how life may have began on Earth. And evidence of that is where these organisms live. And if you look at the slide, really the only trace of humans you see here is in the upper right hand corner, the viewing platform of a Yellowstone thermal pool. So these things live in extreme environments for sure. They love salt lakes, as you can see in the upper left. They love different pHs, acidic or basic, very nasty environments. On the bottom right is pretty much when these things were first truly discovered. That's a deep sea vent, which is thousands of feet under the ocean surface. So there's zero light, tons of pressure, and that water reaches nearly 400 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's definitely boiling, and the bacteria thrive there. So extreme environments for sure. It is a very unique kingdom as well. And the last kingdom, Kingdom Archaebacteria. As I said before, they are prokaryotic, and if we were to compare the descriptions of each kingdom through their characteristics, we'd see that they're identical except for where they live. And again, in the 90s, we used to consider both Archaebacteria and Eubacteria part of the same kingdom. It used to be called Kingdom Monera. And until recently, again about 5 years ago, we didn't have domains. Now we have domains, and Archaebacteria is in its own domain now. So the reason for all this distinction is that, again, the importance of where we think these guys originated from, or basically where we may have originated from. So if we were to rewind the clock and see what the primitive Earth may have looked like, it may resemble some of these extreme environments. So that's why Archaebacteria has such a distinction and where it got its name.